December 24th, 1945, near Salem, Oregon. The paper star in the farmhouse window trembled in the draft, cinnamon and pine moving through the hallway as the radio softened into a carol. Hana stood beside Yumi on the porch, hands visible, waiting after the knock. Announce. Permission ritual the matron had insisted on. A Navy petty officer home on leave watched from the doorway, jaw tight, cap under his arm. When he shifted, Hana eased half a step in front of Yumi, a shield small as a breath. On the kitchen wall, a penciled note read, "Guess first, no harsh words at table." The host pressed a pair of wooden chopsticks across a white cloth, as if laying oars to calm water. "Your guests here," he said, steady. The petty officer's stare held, then wavered as the carol rose. Silent night. The matron lifted her head. "Shall we pray?" Hands found hands. The paper star flickered like a truce. "If this moved you, consider subscribing and tell us your country below." 3 weeks earlier, Marion County Work Detail Barracks. The first snow of the week had not decided whether to fall or to hang in the air. It drifted in hesitant grains over the barracks yard, while Hana stacked empty crates behind the mess shed, breath pale as linen. The work detail bell clanged twice. She counted the echoes, one way to keep her hands from trembling when strangers approached. Mr. Keene, the civilian supervisor with a pencil behind his ear, crossed the yard carrying a small envelope tied with a thin blue ribbon. He walked like a man stepping between arguments. "Hana," he said, not loudly. "There's a holiday matter." She wiped her palms on her sleeve. "Yes, sir." He glanced toward the office, where a radio murmured a noon farm report, the signal sliding in and out like a tide. Radio meant weather, and weather meant less talk. She wished the volume would rise. "This is from the Miller farm," Keene said. "A Christmas supper invitation. For you and Yumi, is it? They sent it formal." Formal. The ribbon cut a neat line across the envelope, a river on paper. "Are we permitted?" she asked. "With escort, by schedule." Permitted is a word with splinters. Keene scratched his jaw. Regulations say community meals can be allowed if supervised and on record. Circular from last year. War Department hygiene and courtesy rules, you know the list. Knock, announce, permission, guests first. We've followed worse checklists. She nodded. The words had become part of her hands. She could knock in a way that was almost prayer. From the kitchen, someone opened a tin. A faint, sweet cinnamon breath moved into the cold and surprised her throat. The scent was a door to another winter. Wood smoke, a mother's careful slicing of finger-length seaweed, the hush before a festival she no longer named aloud. Keene set the envelope on the crate. "There's pushback in town," he added. "Newspapermen like verbs that bruise, but the Millers, they're stubborn in a quiet way. Folks say their window has a paper star year after year." A paper star, thin, ordinary, a map cut from light. Hana imagined it trembling where the house met the weather. "Will there be prayer?" she asked, unsure why the question moved ahead of her. "In that house, yes," Keene said. "Nobody's required, but they'll fold their heads. They'll also expect you to be spoken to as guests, not stock. I'll be there, and Deputy Lawson will see you home before curfew." She thought of Yumi, who collected gentle words the way children collect shells and hide the cracked ones. "We accept," Hana said, and felt the sentence fit her teeth as if it had been measured there. "We'll follow the rules." Keene's face eased. He signed the pass slip with the same pencil that held his worry in place. "Then we'll call it a supervised cultural supper." His tone made the bureaucracy sound almost kind. "You may show the card to Yumi." Inside the barracks, the radio left the farm report for a low hymn played by a station farther north. Somebody turned the dial until the static softened. Yumi looked up from mending a cuff. "What is it?" she whispered. A ribbon, Hana said. She placed the envelope in Yumi's hands as if passing a fragile cup. And a table set for guests. The snow finally decided. It fell without hurry, small and exact. Hana listened to it touch the roof in a rhythm that matched her breath. She repeated to herself, knock, announce, permission, like steps on a narrow bridge. On the far bank, a star of paper waited where a window would be. They practiced in the laundry room because the steam made voices gentle. A line of damp shirts swung like pale flags, and Yumi traced the phrase on her palm, "Thank you for inviting us," until the words felt stitched there. Hana stood opposite her, counting the etiquette steps the way she once counted pulse beats. Knock, announce, permission, enter. Don't bow too fast, Hana said. Let them meet your eyes first. Yumi nodded. The mended cuff from yesterday kneed against her wrist. If they pray, she asked, what do I do with my hands? Hold them still, Hana said. A quiet cup. Outside, the yard carried the scrape of shovels and the thin ring of a hammer. In the office, the WWII tested stations, a grainy waltz, then weather, then a carol that dropped a single clear note like a pin of light. Someone turned it down, as if politeness had a volume knob. A woman from the next bunk, Emmy, leaned in the doorway, arms crossed over her apron. They invited you into a house, she said, not accusing, not approving. Some people want a story they can show the newspaper. We go with a supervisor, Hana answered, on record, back by curfew. Emmy's mouth pressed into a line that could have been worry or envy. Be careful with smiles, she said, and left a small orange on the folding table as if to pay for her warning. Mr. Keene arrived with a clipboard and a folded paper the size of a recipe card. Message from Mrs. Miller, he said. She writes like she keeps a tidy kitchen. He read, Guests first, prayer before supper. We will not speak ill in our house. Please come. Yumi's eyes moved across the handwriting, slow as a fingertip, learning a map. Guests first, she whispered, and the words straightened her shoulders. Keene pinned a short list to the wall, condensed rules for the evening, courtesies and hygiene, no roaming, no sudden exits, speak plainly if uncertain. These aren't shackles, he said. They're bridges. The Geneva people like bridges. He shrugged, aware of how official language could scrape the ear. Do your part, I'll do mine. Hana took out the wooden chopsticks. She had borrowed from a friend who saved small things in a biscuit tin. The sticks were light as bird bones and smooth where the grain had learned patience. She wrapped them in a handkerchief, then unwrapped them, testing the motion until it became a rehearsal for calm. The cinnamon smell came again, stronger now. The cook had found a jar at the back of the shelf and was coaxing it into something sweet. Hana closed her eyes and let the scent sketch a room she did not yet know, a table as bright as paper, a star cut from paper, trembling where the door leaked winter. In the corridor, two men from town spoke to the guard in quick, low English. Hana caught only editorial and bad idea, words that bruise even when you do not know their full shape. Keene met the men halfway. His voice did not rise. After a moment, the men left, their footsteps quick as if chased by their own certainty. Coats, Keene said, returning. It will be colder on the road than it looks. Deputy Lawson will drive. They dressed without fuss. Yumi tucked the biscuit tin handkerchief into her pocket. Hana smoothed the small PW letters on her sleeve, the way one smooths a scar, acknowledging it, not apologizing for it. At the door, Emmy stopped them again. She hesitated, then pressed the orange into Hana's hand. For the way back, she said, if the silence is heavy. Thank you, Hana answered. She already knew how she would share it. Two halves, then two thinner crescents, like moons learning to become whole. They stepped into the evening. Snow promised itself in the sky, but held back. The truck engine coughed, settled, and the radio geed in the office found a carol clean enough to follow them out the gate. Knock, announce, permission. The words were their steps as the fence slipped behind, and the road unrolled toward a farmhouse where a paper star waited to shiver in a draft they had not yet felt. Deputy Lawson slowed the truck at the end of a gravel lane where a mailbox leaned into winter like a tired shoulder. The farmhouse rose beyond bare apple trees, its windows breathing a soft yellow that made the snow look bluer. In the nearest pane, a paper star trembled, alive to every seam of wind. Knock, announce, permission, Hannah said under her breath, and the syllables steadied her spine. Lawson tipped his hat and stayed with the truck, engine ticking as if counting them in. They walked the last 20 paces. The porch board spoke in small winter sounds beneath their steps. Hannah paused at the door and looked once at Yumi, whose scarf had slipped to reveal the curve of her jaw. Yumi nodded, and Hannah knocked, 3 calm taps, and announced their names, then waited. The waiting was part of the bridge. The door opened to a corridor of warmth and chalky lamplight. Cinnamon. Drifted from a kitchen somewhere to the left. To the right, a parlor held a low, radio glow, its dial like a small moon just past full. Mrs. Muller stood in the doorway, apron tied neat, hair pinned into a kind of practical crown. "Please come in," she said. Her English had the careful shape of someone who respected words the way she respected flour. No waste, no lumps. "Shoes can stay if they're dry." Hannah and Yumi stepped inside, hands visible at their sides. Behind them, another figure rose from a chair in the parlor, a young man in a navy dress cap, with the brim tucked under his arm. He didn't speak. His gaze found the small PW letters on Hannah's sleeve and stopped there, as if he had reached a gate not yet unlocked. "Carl," Mrs. Muller said gently, not turning. "Guess first?" He moved a fraction, the way a tree moves in a wind you barely feel. The radioig softened its carol to a hush between verses. In the kitchen, Mr. Muller adjusted the corners of a white tablecloth until they made a perfect cross of seams. He set 2 shallow bowls at the near end, and after only a heartbeat's thought, reached into a drawer and brought out a pair of wooden chopsticks. He laid them on the cloth as if placing oars beside a narrow boat. Yumi's breath hitched, almost a sound, then steadied. "Thank you for inviting us," Hannah said. She heard her voice from an inch outside herself and was grateful for its calm. "You are welcome tonight," Mrs. Muller said. "All words here will be kind." She gestured toward hooks on the wall. Coats found their places as if they had practiced. Carl stepped into the kitchen doorway, cap still under his arm. The room's light smoothed the hard line of his jaw, but did not erase it. His eyes flicked from the chopsticks to Hannah's sleeve, then to Yumi's careful hands. For a moment, the air felt crowded with 2 winters, the one on the other side of the door, and the one inside people carry. Mr. Muller cleared his throat. "We will sit soon," he said. "My wife will say the blessing." He lifted the kettle, and steam wrote brief messages that no one read. The cinnamon rose again, warmer now, threaded with butter. Hannah eased a half step, so that Yumi now stood slightly to her right. Within that small shelter, a body can give another. It was not a barricade. It was a promise. Carl noticed. Something in his stance loosened, then tightened again, like a knot deciding. He set his cap on the sideboard, fingers flattening the cloth. From the parlor, the radio found the opening notes of a carol everyone here would know. The melody arranged the room, placing each person in a circle that felt older than argument. Mrs. Muller looked toward the table, then toward them. "We will pray," she said, voice low. "Then we will eat." Hannah swallowed, tasting metal and spice and a thread of fear that was not shame. She let her gaze rest for a heartbeat on the paper star. In the window. It shivered again and seemed to steady her with its small courage. "Please," she said, and the word opened a path to the next moment. They stood behind their chairs as if at a small ceremony. The white tablecloth made a field where nothing should be spilled. Neither gravy nor anger. Steam drifted from the kettle and from a pie whose cinnamon had grown rounder, like a word said softer each time. Mrs. Muller placed her hands lightly on the chair back. "We will give thanks," she said. "No one is required to speak." Her eyes went to Hana and Yumi, not asking, only offering a place to rest their gaze. The key radio in the parlor had lowered itself to a whispering shore. A carol rose and fell like distant surf. Carl remained by the sideboard, cap set down, shoulders not quite at ease. His stance made a corner in the room. Mr. Muller nodded to his wife. She bowed her head in that practical way of hers, a movement that gathered the room. "For bread," she said, "for safe roofs, and for the courage to use our words kindly." She let the silence breathe. "For guests who stand in our doorway and choose to cross." Hana kept her hands still, a quiet cup as she had practiced. The prayer was neither hers nor against her. She watched a thread of steam lift and vanish, the way a hard thought sometimes leaves when you do not chase it. Carl's jaw shifted. The wallpaper star. In the window trembled to a draft only it could feel. He looked at that star as if it were signaling in a language he used to know. Mr. Muller pulled out the chair at the head of the table. "You are guests here," he said. Nearly the same words as before, but this time they placed themselves more firmly on the cloth, like utensils aligned. No harsh words at table. Something settled. Chairs moved. Cloth whispered. Hana guided. Yumi Huber to the seat nearest the stove's warmth and took the place beside her where her shoulder could be a small weather break. The first platter, potatoes, passed to Hana. She hesitated, unsure of the portion that meant gratitude but not greed. Carl stepped nearer, not to hover, but to reach the ladle. He tilted it so that the potatoes slid into her bowl with an ordinary sound. Yumi's breath met hers and steadied. "Thank you," Hana said. "You're welcome," Carl answered, the syllables careful, like a man testing thin ice. His eyes did not avoid her sleeve letters this time. They moved past them and found her face, then moved away again, not rudely, just learning. Bread followed, then butter. The radio let a single chime ring and then fell back, as if blessing the passing of dishes. When the chopsticks were offered, Hana unwrapped them from their handkerchief. She held them not as a claim, but as a courtesy to the gestures she had brought with her across water and months. "I hope the pie isn't too sweet," Mrs. Muller said to the air, which is how one announces that sweetness will be allowed. Emptiness tried once more to enter through the door where Carl stood. He looked toward the window again, toward the trembling paper star, then back to the table. "Coffee?" he asked no one and everyone. When he poured, the thin stream was the sound of a truce practicing its vowels. Hana tasted the potatoes. Salt, cream, heat. The first swallow reminded her that a body can learn safety in small, warm increments. Across the table, Mr. Muller's penciled note, "Guess first, no harsh words," was pinned to the wall, the graphite faint but legible, a posted ritual. The carol reached its line that even Hana knew without translation. Her mouth shaped it silently. Beside her. Yumi's shoulders came down a finger's width. They ate. Conversation did not begin so much as arrive. Weather, the orchard's late blight, the post office's holiday hours. No one spoke of ships or camps. The cinnamons in the air drew its looping pattern through all of it, a thread that did not need to be seen to hold. When the pie knife finally touched the crust, the room had learned to breathe at the same depth. Hannah met Carl's eyes and held them for the polite length of a greeting. He looked away first, but not in refusal. It was simply a man setting down a weight that would take more than one motion to leave his hands. Outside, the night pressed colder against the panes. Inside, the table held. The blessing had not solved anything a headline could print, but it had quietly rearranged the furniture of the room so that people could walk through without bumping their knees. Conversation arrived like weather you could walk in, harmless, a little chill at first. Mr. Muller asked about the orchard as if the trees could answer for everyone. Late blight, windbreaks, the way frost laces the low branches before dawn. Hannah nodded and let the shapes of the words pass over her. She offered a careful sentence about pruning she had watched from the truck on workdays. Yumi added, almost inaudibly, that apples kept in a cool room will outlast a long week. The radio in the parlor found a carol with a bright spine. Then, sensing the table's breathing, it softened again. The pie's cinnamon had settled into the air until it felt like a fabric stretched across the room, light but definite. Hannah could tell which part of the fabric would tear if someone tugged too hard. "What kinds of winter you have?" Mrs. Muller began, and then stopped, as if the question had been walking toward a ravine. She bridged it quickly. "I mean, which foods keep best where you're from?" "Rice," Hannah said. The syllable lay clean on the table. "Pickled plums," she added, and felt the sour salt of them wake a corner of her mouth. "Dried fish sometimes." "Root cellars do the Lord's patient work," Mr. Muller said, rescuing the moment with a proverb that smelled of old wood. "Things wait underground until the world is ready." From the sideboard. Carl Wad poured coffee for his uncle, then stood with the pot poised. He looked like a man whose feet remembered a deck's pitch even on steady floors. When he turned, his gaze passed over Hannah, paused at Yumi, and revised itself. "Milk?" he asked. The single word sanded down to civility. Yumi startled as if he had touched the air near her shoulder. "Yes, thank you," she said, the words small but intact. Carl reached for the pitcher, and the white stream found Yumi's cup in one clean line, no spill. He did the same for Hannah. The sound of liquid meeting porcelain was precise, almost ceremonial. "Thank you," Hannah said, and this time she did not have to find her voice from outside herself. Carl gave a half nod, the bow of a man who remembered that respect and distance can share a single gesture. They ate in small sentences. Pie arrived, thin slices that said both welcome and restraint. The cinnamon. Met the butter and spoke of warmth without boasting. Hannah watched Yumi take her first bite and look briefly like a younger version of herself before camps and notices and lines. "Do you have snow where—" Carl started, and tripped on the where the way a boot finds a threshold in the dark. "Sometimes," Hannah answered. "It makes the world quiet in 1 hour, then noisy again when it melts." He let out a breath, neither laugh nor sigh. "That's true here too." The paper star. In the window stirred, and Hannah thought of sails, a different war, a different sea, none of it at this table. She placed her chopsticks down when bread came back around and used the small knife as Mrs. Muller did. It felt like borrowing a language and saying please with it. When someone at the door coughed, the noise was only a neighbor's winter throat, but it carried a hint of voices from town, opinions waiting on porches. Mr. Muller glanced up, then looked back at the table as if to say, "Inside, we set the weather." Hannah felt something unclench behind her ribs. The world had not changed. It had only made room. Across from her, Yumi met her eyes, and for the width of a heartbeat, They shared the ridiculous, ordinary relief of people who have swallowed without tasting fear. Carl refilled the milk, unasked. The pitcher chimed once against the rim, an accidental bell announcing that a different kind of order was possible, at least for the length of a meal. The knock came between the pie and the coffee. It was not urgent, only practiced. The sound of someone who had opinions and had knocked on many doors to deliver them. Mr. Muller wiped his hands on a towel and opened the door to a man with a gray cap and a scarf the color of road dust. Snow freckled his shoulders, as if the night had been trying to write on him. He took in the table, the two women, the wooden chopsticks, folded back onto their handkerchief. "Evening," he said, hat to chest. "Brought the paper by. Editorial in it tonight. Town's talking." "Evening, Otto," Mr. Muller answered. "You'll freeze there. Come in or don't, but don't let the cold decide." Otto stepped inside to the edge of the rug, as if he had been taught not to cross a threshold with muddy boots or muddy thoughts. His eyes found the small PW letters and paused just long enough to make the temperature of the room drop a fraction. "Some folks say houses are for families," he said to the air. "Camp has its own halls." Mrs. Muller's face did not change. She lifted the coffee pot as if it weighed no more than a sentence and offered it. "You take it the same as last year," she said. "2 sugars, no sermon." A line appeared at the corner of Otto's mouth that might have been a smile caught halfway through becoming one. He removed his cap. "2 sugars," he conceded. The radio in the parlor drifted into static and then, obedient to a turning dial, found a melody that sounded like frost dissolving on glass. Hannah kept her hands folded, the quiet cup. Yumi stared at the pie's cinnamon ridges as if they were a topographic map of a calmer country. Carl leaned back against the sideboard, jaw set but no longer locked, watching the weather inside the room like a sailor reading wind. "People fear what they think they know," Otto began, the editorial trying to line up behind his words. "They say kindness gets remembered wrong." "Kindness always gets remembered wrong at first," Mrs. Muller said mildly. "By spring, it looks like common sense." Otto's gaze snapped to hers, then softened. He stirred his cup with care. "We've all had names put on us," he said more quietly. "Some stick." Hannah felt the truth of that settle over her sleeve like another layer of cloth. She let a breath out that did not ask anyone for permission. "Where I grew up," she said, voice even, "there is a children's song about winter ending. It is short." She did not look at anyone and did not translate. She hummed the line like a thread. No words, only the shape of them, rising and returning. The paper star trembled as if it could hear. The room, arranged by the melody, stood still long enough to understand that the hum was for the air more than for the people. Otto lowered his spoon. "My grandmother used to hum to the stove," he said, almost to himself. "Said, bread listens better than men." Carl's mouth tilted, not a smile exactly. "True of ships, too," he said, and surprised himself with the sound of his own voice among theirs. Mr. Muller, who had been a farmer too long to rush ripening, nodded toward the window. "Star says winds shifted. Roads will crust by morning." "Then I won't overstay," Otto replied, halfway to the door and halfway to staying. He looked at Hannah and Yumi as if searching for a respectful distance he could keep and still be human. "Editorials are colder on paper," he said at last. "People warm them or cool them." He touched the brim of his cap to Mrs. Muller. "Pie smells like the old year behaving itself." "Take a slice," she said, already wrapping one in paper, as if she had expected this detente all evening. When the door closed behind him, the K-radio's carol returned, brighter now. The room did not cheer. It merely breathed in and out, like a thing that had reminded itself how. Hannah felt the smallest tilt inside her sternum, as if the table had moved an inch closer to level. She reached for her cup. Carl reached for the pitcher. The milk met porcelain with that precise bell again. Outside, the night rearranged its snow. Inside, the paper star held its tremble, a signature the house was willing to sign over and over. The evening folded itself into smaller gestures, plates easing back to the sink, chairs nudging the table as if to say thank you in wood. The radio let a final carol taper into a low, steady hum, the kind of sound a house keeps for itself after guests have stood. Steam from the kettle drifted up and wrote a brief farewell on the lamplight. "We won't keep you past the clock," Mr. Miller said, glancing at the wall where a pencil mark underlined the curfew hour. "Road will glaze if we hesitate." Hannah wrapped the wooden chopsticks in their handkerchief and tucked them into her pocket with care, the way one stows a letter you plan to read again in silence. Yumi slipped her arms into her coat. Her hands found the orange shape that Emmy had pressed on them and held it like a warm thought. Mrs. Muller opened a drawer and brought out a small stack of postcards, white with a faint border the color of winter sky. She chose one, uncapped a blue pen, and wrote "Peace and a Clean Year" in a hand as tidy as her kitchen. Then she turned the card and added the farm's mailbox number, as if saying this door has an address you can use even when your feet cannot come back. "For you," she said to Hannah, and then to Yumi, and for you. Her eyes never touched the PW letters. They held only the persons wearing them. Hannah felt the card's lightness. It seemed to weigh exactly as much as a choice made once and kept. She asked, "May I write?" The question surprised her mouth by how much it wanted to exist. "Please," Mrs. Miller said, already sliding a second pen across the table. Hannah bent over the postcard, the blue line trembling only once before it steadied. She wrote in English first, "Thank you for supper and for kind words." Then, beneath it, in Japanese, "May the year arrive with soft steps." She did not translate it aloud. It was enough that the thought had crossed a border. Carl watched from the sideboard, cap in his hands again as if it were a compass he had not yet finished reading. When Hannah straightened, he stepped forward, not too close, and held out a small coil of string. "So it doesn't slip," he said. She looped the string around the postcard, and his fingers stayed clear of hers with a care that felt like respect, not distance. At the door, the wallpaper star shivered in the small draft it had been making all evening. Hannah looked at it and, without deciding to, lifted her chin in the star's direction, the quiet salute of one object to another that had done its work. The night met them with a cold that cleaned every edge. Gravel crunched underfoot. The truck breathed its little clouds. Deputy Lawson checked his watch and then the road. "Right on time," he said, pleased with the arithmetic of decency and rules. "Thank you for inviting us," Hannah said again at the threshold, because repetition is how a truth becomes part of a day. Mrs. Muller touched the tips of her fingers to her own apron in reply, a gesture that might have been a curtsy once in another century. Carl lifted his cap, not quite a wave. "Good night," he said, and the words held no stones. As the truck turned in the lane, Cinnamon Eye clung to Hannah's scarf, a ghost of warmth hitching a ride back through the fences. The house's windows shrank to squares in the dark. The paper star flickered twice more, then steadied into a single point. The radio's hum thinned into distance until it was only the road and the engine and the soft percussion of snow choosing to fall. Hannah slid the postcard into her coat and pressed it flat against her heart, testing how a small rectangle could hold a room. She inhaled the last of the spice and thought, not of headlines or camps, but of ordinary words written in blue that could arrive somewhere without arguments. Behind them, the farmhouse returned to its breathing. Ahead, the gate waited to count them in. The gate clicked them back into numbers, then into names again. The truck's engine dimmed to a ticking heart. Frost ran its pale brush over the fenders. In the barracks, the stove breathed a small orange, and the room arranged itself around it the way people do around any center that does not ask questions. Emmy looked up first. "Curfew?" she asked, as if the arithmetic might reveal the morality. "On time," Hannah said, unwrapping her scarf. A faint cinnamon threaded the wool. The scent did what memory always does. It moved faster than words and told the room something had happened without deciding what to call it. "What did they want?" another woman asked from her bunk, weaving skepticism through the blanket of curiosity. "To keep their table warm," Yumi answered before Hannah could, surprising herself. She sat and placed the orange on the crate between bunks like an offering that required no altar. Skepticism tugged at the corner of a mouth. "Table's cool," someone said. "People talk." "They do," Hannah replied. "Tonight they talked about weather and apples." She let the simplicity stand, neither defending nor performing. She set the wooden chopsticks on her pillow, then slipped them into the seam of the pillowcase, out of sight, not hidden. A charm belongs where the hand can find it in the dark. Mr. Keene came down the aisle with a small ledger and a larger tiredness. "Mail carton 20, he said, "Red Cross parcels on top, and—" He hesitated like a man about to break a minor law for the sake of a larger one. 5 minutes of radio after roll call. Consider it seasonal." A rustle moved through the room, the kind that sounds like doubt losing a little ground. Emmy tried not to smile and failed. Roll call stacked the names in a careful column. The radio, when Keene turned the knob, offered first a burst of distance and then a carol that had walked a long way to get here. Notes pooled in the low places of the room, around boots and bed frames, around the orange and the pillow seam where the chopsticks rested like two quiet ideas. A woman by the stove said, "Maybe they invited you to look kind." She did not make it sharp. She made it weary. "Maybe," Hannah said. "Sometimes people start with the wrong reason and end with the right one." The mail cart arrived. Brown paper bundles with tight string, a handful of postcards, a tin of salve that smelled like menthol and thrift. A Red Cross label winked from a corner. Keene passed a small packet across to Hannah. Inside were 2 tea bags, a square of dark chocolate, and a card printed with a message about the year turning. She broke the chocolate with Yumi into neat halves, then again into crescents, moons finding their way toward fullness. "What did the house look like?" Emmy asked, softer now. "Like a place that had practiced being a house for a long time," Hannah said. "There was a paper star in the window. It trembled a little." Emmy nodded as if stars were a technical subject she understood. The radio's last chord held the room together for a breath, then let go. Keene clicked it off. Silence returned, not empty, but freshly swept. "Lights in 12, he said, more gently than orders usually sound. Hannah tucked the postcard into the flap of her trunk with the string still looped, then lay back. The cinnamon that had ridden home in her scarf faded into plain wool. In the space where her hands sometimes made fists without asking her, there was only warmth from the pillow, and the knowledge of the paw, chopsticks, along its seam. She did not pray. She counted the breaths between stove sighs. Outside, frost stitched the yard into one fabric. Inside, sleep came on with the same patience as a kettle beginning to simmer. Morning would bring work, and words on porches, and the arithmetic of rules. But tonight the room had held 5 minutes of music without collapsing. That was not a headline. It was enough to begin another page. By morning, the frost had written neat rows across the roof, like a schoolboy finally learning his letters. Work call came with its familiar clatter. The world resumed the arithmetic that keeps hands busy and thoughts from spilling. Hannah stacked sacks in the shed and felt, each time she lifted one, the small tug where a memory had decided to live. News travels on foot faster than radios. Before noon, a guard mentioned that the paper had run another editorial. Cooler this time, though still convinced that kindness belongs behind fences. Someone at the pump said a church up the road was planning an afternoon service for peace. The radio confirmed it, voice warm as a coat. Carols in town, a message about doors and how to open them without letting the weather in. Emmy met Hannah by the stove at break. "They say you wrote on a postcard," she said, not asking. "I did," Hannah answered. 2 lines. She did not repeat them. Words grow brittle when displayed too often. She touched the handkerchief where the wooden chopsticks had rested last night, then let the cloth fall, as if returning a curtain to its hook. Mr. Keene appeared with a manila envelope under his arm and the faintly harried look of someone trying to guide a wagon between ditches. "Town council talked late," he reported. "Decided on a case-by-case policy for holiday visits. That's bureaucrat for, we'll let decent people be decent if they keep records." His mouth tilted. "I can carry any mail you've got." Hannah took out the Alm postcard. Mrs. Muller had given, and added a second, addressed in her careful English to Muller family, by the orchard, with the leaning box. She tucked a plain sheet inside, not a letter so much as a room where a letter might one day live. "Thank you for giving us practice," she wrote, and stopped there. Practice for what did not need spelling out. At lunch, the kitchen smelled faintly of something sweet. A cook had found cinnamon girders crumbs at the bottom of a jar and coaxed them into rice pudding. The scent lifted and set down the room like a tide. Yumi held her bowl in both hands and ate slowly, as if not to jostle a thought. "Town will forget by January," someone said, aiming comfort and landing on dismissal. "Maybe," Hannah replied. "Forgetting is a kind of rest. Remembering kindly is harder." In the afternoon, the chaplain from another camp stopped by with a stack of thin hymn sheets and a request to borrow the radio for 15 minutes on Sunday. Keene agreed, made a note, then lingered. "If anyone asks," he said, "I'll tell them you followed every rule and did the county proud by doing nothing dramatic." Hannah smiled for the first time that day. Not wide, but true. Nothing dramatic is difficult sometimes. Near dusk, a small parcel arrived at the gate. No return name, twine tied with a sailor's competence. Inside, a sprig of fir, a button polished to a soft shine, and a paper triangle cut from what might once have been a star. No message. The twine told the story well enough. Hannah placed the triangle beside her bunk and did not ask Yumi if she recognized the hand behind it. After lights out, the barracks rested on its breaths again. The paper star, in her mind, flickered once more, then steadied, as if the house had loaned it to her for as long as she needed. She slid the chopsticks from the pillow seam and back again, not to check on them, but to learn the path her fingers would take in the dark. Tomorrow would bring the last mail before the year turned. The road between the orchard and the gate felt shorter now. Even on a map she could not hold. One more page, she thought, then let the year arrive with soft steps. The last mail before the year turned came with the sound of twine untying, soft, definite, like a knot deciding to be a line again. Mr. Keene set the sack on the table and read names as if weighing them, then passed out parcels that smelled faintly of ink and cold. "Hannah," he called, and placed 2 things in her hands, a postcard and a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper. The card's blue border matched the tidy winter sky from another night. On the back, Mrs. Muller's handwriting moved like a careful broom. "Thank you for your calm company. We pray for doors that open and close at the right times. Peace to you, Beneath, a second line, different hand, the letters a little upright with sailor's patience. Coffee was too strong. Pi was right. See, Hana read it once and let the words sit without jostling them. Yumi leaned in, eyes bright as if someone had turned up a lamp by a notch. Inside the brown paper lay a folded cloth square, and stitched at one corner a small paper star, cut from sturdier stock. The cloth smelled faintly of cupboards and the cinnamon. Not enough to be a scent exactly, more like the memory of a scent visiting through a door you had left unlocked on purpose. Emmy came nearer, pretending to inspect the twine. "They wrote?" she asked, like a woman asking whether the weather had kept its promise. "They wrote," Hana said, "only what was needed." At noon, Keen got permission to bring the radio into the corridor. 15 minutes for the year, he announced. No speeches. Music knows its job. The set crackled, then found a bell that rang once and waited, as if teaching the room how to hold a note. Hana pinned the postcard to the inside of her trunk lid, where eyes could find it without tongues having to explain it. She tucked the cloth square beneath her pillow seam, beside the koka, wooden chopsticks. The three things making a small, exact geometry. Hold, steady, guide. "Will you answer?" Yumi asked. "Only this," Hana said, and took the blank side of a canteen label. She wrote, "Your star arrived safely. We will keep it where drafts can find it. May the year step softly." She paused, then added in Japanese, brief as a breath, "Thank you for lending us a table." Keen cleared his throat. "I can slip it into town after roll." His voice tried to be procedural and could not quite manage it. The bell on the radio counted down a minute the way a heart counts down to sleep. Around them, the barracks learned the silence that follows a good sound. Someone handed around the last orange. Hana split it into halves, then into crescents, moons practicing being whole, and passed them palm to palm until only the bright on her fingers remained. Outside, frost and thaw argued in whispers along the eaves. Inside, names were called for evening check, and each answered. When the list ended, the year did not arrive with trumpets. It crossed the threshold the way decent people do in winter. Knock, announce, permission, then entered on the soft soles of its best intentions. Hana lay back and let the pillow teach her the outline of rest. She did not plan the months. She rehearsed, once, the calm steps to a door, knock, speak your name, wait, be welcomed, or be patient. In the window of her mind, a paper star trembled. Not from fear anymore, but from the small, ordinary winds that houses make when they breathe. The bell rang its last clear tone. No one cheered. The room simply agreed to begin again.